On today's episode, we talk with restaurant owner Seiya Bowen about what it's like to take over a business and run one of the most popular small restaurants in Albuquerque, and what kind of effects that can have on one's personal life.
Me being here, I saw how much it was working, and I knew it was taxing. And so when we came back, I think I ended up because I had at this point, I have no sort of professional cooking experience or anything. I just, what I knew was what I observed and saw. I knew I knew well how to wait tables and sort of the management side of it. Payrolls and financing and things like that, but I had no clue what really the back of the house looked like.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Humanity Skuru. This is our fourth episode, and we are speaking with guest Seiya Bowen. The Look, are you the? Would you consider yourself the owner at this point?
Yeah, technically, it's myself and really my wife, and so we both kind of co-own it at the moment.
Okay. The
Yeah.
owners, co-owners of Magokoro, which most of you know is my favorite restaurant, pretty much ever. I mean, and say you know this, I'm there several times a week when I can be, um, simply because I mean, curry. I'm a curry fan,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, you
Uh,
come often, but you've also been coming for a long time.
a very long time. In fact, that's sort of where I wanted to start with this. Is I can remember going to this place since at least I feel like 2007, if I'm not mistaken. Your
Hmm.
dad was primarily there. I remember seeing him, and if I'm not mistaken, your mom working pretty consistently.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, I mean, the restaurant's sort of the origin. I mean, it was a family business, so
Sure.
we were all kind of there in between sort of work or school for me, really. But my mom had originally started this restaurant, really under the name Kokoro.
Kokoro, that's right. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we started off as Kokoro, and that was in 2007, like you said. And I mean, I was still in high school then. I think, a sophomore in high school, maybe going into my junior year. And so I would be just like with my other siblings, kind of helping after work. So that was my daily routine. I would get off school and then I would get on the city bus and get to work. I'll get there around 3 o'clock, and I'll be waiting tables at night. And then on the weekends, whatever sort of my mom really needed.
Sure. So, okay, because yeah, that's right. I think I remember you had a sister who helped occasionally, and in the early days,
Hmm.
because this is right around the time when I had purchased my business. So I was actually doing
Hmm.
business meetings there at the time, um, while we sort of like sorted out stuff on our end. But I remember, yeah, your sister. If I'm not, how many siblings do you have?
So I have an older sister and a younger brother.
Younger brother. Okay, fascinating. All right.
Yeah.
But you're the one who decided to continue pursuing the restaurant portion of things.
Kind of. I mean, yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than that, of course.
Sure.
But I mean, my mom. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, people kind of confuse sort of who owns this place, who does what, and I mean, originally, I mean, so my mom started this business in 2007. She had actually, I mean, she's actually went to culinary school in Tokyo at a like young age. So she went to culinary school and she'd been working sort of in kitchens. She kind of moved to America as a sort of a missionary through kind of her church
Mm,
organization that she's involved with.
mhm.
And through this organization, that's how she kind of met my dad. But my mom basically kind of did odds and end jobs, more primarily working in restaurants. She came to a point to where really, I mean, she needed a more of a stable income, and so she decided to open her own business. And that actually happened to look like a sushi restaurant. So at UNM, I'm not sure if you're familiar, they do sell like packaged sushi. My mom actually is the person who originally started this. This was in, oh man, oh, I'm getting my times, probably around 2004, 2005.
Oh,
She
wow, okay.
started this, yeah, business at UNM. She basically went there and kind of basically borrowed a little corner of their kitchen that makes all those sort of the foods for catering and all the stuff for the little Mercado, the markets at UNM. So she basically borrowed a little portion of the kitchen. She was rolling sushi and packaging it, and then we would distribute those sushi to all the different little stores around campus. So there's about I think 4 or 5 campus around UNM. So that's where we would package. She would make them in the morning, package them, and then we would basically put them on our bicycles. I would help doing this with my dad. We would have little bicycles rigged with the little baskets in the back, and so we would load them up with a bunch of sushi or coolers, and we would cycle them to different grocery stores on campus, drop them off, and then that's what my mom did for a while. My dad really he's also has a little background in food, but he was basically running his own little business, selling flowers,
Okay.
and that's kind of yeah. My mom and him actually did that for a long time before her deciding to open up her own business. But that's kind of how she really got started. I think about 3 years after she started her little business at UNM, she basically got kicked out. They weren't going to renew her contract there, and so she just needed a way to support her family. And the next sort of progression was basically opening her own restaurant. And so that's how this place came to be. We've been at the same location for all these years. And so next year is really our 16th year. This space used to be a like a loan place. It's like a title loan, so it was an office building.
Sure.
And she came in here and she renovated into a restaurant.
And that's not cheap. That's quite an endeavor
Yeah,
to go down. Yeah.
it is. Yeah, it's a big risk. I mean, it was kind of an interesting story there too. I mean, my mom, of course, is an immigrant, and there's she had a lot of hard time getting really the finances to really start her own business. So she went to the bank, but she was denied multiple times. And so what she ended up doing, the only thing she could actually do was put it all on credit cards. So what she
Oh
did was,
wow.
yeah, she took out I think 7 or 8 credit cards and kind of financed everything on the credit cards. And she's just really good. She's really good with money and figuring these kind of things out. And so that's what she did. She kind of spread it all out on 7 or 8 different credit cards and kind of managed payments. And that's how she started this little shop.
Oh, gotcha. And so now, I mean, you're sort of the grandfathered and entrepreneur now to the business. Are you
Mhm.
running like finances, or like how deep is their involvement now, or is it basically you're just doing this and they're hanging out at home?
Um, it's hard to say. I mean, I'm doing. My wife and I really kind of been doing everything here, but my mom again started this business. I mean, she's been kind of out of this restaurant for at least 2 years, but really more like 3, 4 years prior. I never really imagined myself staying here and doing the restaurant. Like I said, I mean, I was doing this kind of in between school and, I started doing high school in my sophomore, junior year. So I would come home, instead of going home, I would come to the restaurant, do my shift. And that was the reality for my brother and sister. So we would all kind of take turns, different shifts. My brother would be working in the back actually with my mom, and I would be up here, waiting tables, and same with my sister. And my same with my dad too. I mean, so we would all kind of take turns taking shifts. So I would come home from school and relieve my dad, and then he would go home, and I would be here, and then take turns. My sister had the right idea. She got out kind of early. She had a chance to get out of the restaurant, and so she did. And so for a long time, it was just myself, my brother, my father, my mom. The four of us really kind of doing it, taking turns. Um, but I never really saw myself staying here long term. I thought this was just something that I did for now. But things kind of worked out a little differently. I mean, my mom is the only child, so the restaurant actually. I mean, we started in 2007, and we were not very popular back then. I mean, we would be serving maybe 1 or 2 people every day, and
Sure.
that was sort of the reality for a little while. And it was the restaurant was really sort of my home. I spent more time at the restaurant than I did anywhere else, and same with my mom and my brothers, my brother and sister too. So it became this place where we all kind of came to connect and communicate, fight. I mean, there are so many fights that happen in these walls, you know.
I can only imagine.
Um, oh, it's hilarious. I mean, yeah, there's so many, memories and things sort of tied to here. Um, but yeah, I mean, I didn't even, I mean, I'm not really a trained chef or anything. I mean, I went to school really for fine arts, and that was kind of what I wanted to do for a long time.
Okay, yeah, that's actually what I was gonna ask is, like, how much, experience did you have, with business in general before it sort of just became part of your life? You know, because obviously, if it's
Yeah.
a business in the family, if your mom has been doing it, your dad has, run a business, you get a little bit of experience through them, but eventually you just sort of learn it because you're exposed to it all the time. And now, I mean, since you've been running this place for, it seems like, quite some time, you've probably got a pretty good grasp on exactly what you need to do and how to run it. um, what's that been like for you, especially since you didn't go to school for this, but you just sort of learned it along
Mhm.
the way?
Yeah, I mean, my mom cooked all the time at home, and she has, she's a chef, and so
Sure.
we cooked a lot at home. I've picked up a lot of things at home,
Did she make you curry at home?
and no, we actually that's what's hilarious because I mean, my mom actually, she when she was going to culinary school and working in sort of different restaurants after her schooling, she really wasn't interested in Japanese cuisine. I mean, her background really is in sort of French cuisine. That's what she wanted to do for a long time, and so she kind of worked in that world in Western cuisine. So she wasn't really cooking Japanese food at home. I mean, really, she'd make these amazing meals at home, but it would rarely be Japanese. Out of 7 days, we might have Japanese maybe twice or something like that. And 5 days of the week it'd be something different. And she loved sort of cooking different things. So it'd be anything from pasta to meatloaf to you name it. She was kind of doing it. So that's kind of how I grew up. I mean, I grew up eating a variety of different things. Not just Japanese cuisine, rarely Japanese cuisine. Yeah, and that's how I mean, and so we picked up a lot of things cooking with her at home, and my dad also has actually gone to sort of culinary school, and he was also working as a professional chef. So there's kind of influence on both ends. But I think I never wanted to be in the restaurant, again, I never saw myself doing this for a long time.
Sure.
um, I got really interested in photography sort of at end of high school. When I got into UNM, that's kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a photojournalist for a long time, so that's what I was kind of working towards. And then when I was into photography, I realized that it wasn't really photojournalism that I was really interested in, but really in the world of fine arts. And so that's what I did. In college, that's what I was working for. I got my BFA at UNM, and I was actually applying to graduate school in fine arts, the focus in photography. But so I was looking to go into different schools and applying to different schools for my MFA. But that's it didn't really work out that way.
Right. I understand completely. I went to school for animation and I've used it almost not at all. And now I'm doing what I do. So I was
Mhm,
curious, like, is that something that at any point you've ever sort of felt resentment for? Because I mean, I'm sure you love the business because you get to do something
mhm.
that's really important to you and the family, but also it can be kind of difficult, I know, to sort of have like a goal in mind. And then when that doesn't happen, like it does kind of linger in the back of your mind, like the what if, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's all I kind of, I mean, before I really, graduating UNM with my BFA, I was just so focused on making work, making art, and I wanted to be an exhibiting artist, and that's what I was doing. I was making my rounds. I was applying to different shows. I was getting different shows. So I was exhibiting in Santa Fe. I was exhibiting. I had some exhibition in China, and then around the country here. Some solo shows and things like that. So that's what I was really focused in. That's what I really wanted to do. My mom, I think, has a hard time understanding this too. What I really wanted. I think she was really concerned that I wasn't going to be able to make a living as an artist. That never
Sure.
really can. Yeah, it's a typical, Asian sort of mom thing. But that was something I was never really concerned about. And with the restaurant that was so in 2000 and I think when I was 24, so about 2014 is when I graduated, and so I basically took 1 year off, kind of went to Japan, was making sort of work. At the time, I mean, the restaurant has the timeline of the restaurant is kind of wonky, and a lot of people don't understand. Basically, we opened in 2007. My mom actually left for Japan about 2011, 2012. So my mom is the only like a single child. She had basically moved back to Japan to kind of care for her parents. I mean, their
Mm,
elderly parents. And so during that time, I was only 2021. I basically myself, my brother, and partially my dad. I mean, the three of us kind of basically managed and ran the restaurant together. And so it was about I think 2 years of that time. The three of us kind of ran the business without her. And we had basically hired like a Japanese chef, and it went on for about 2 years or so, and then it all kind of came to a stop. I mean, we at that point, my mom was still in Japan, wasn't sure when she was coming back. We were all sort of kind of burnt out at this point, and at this point, we basically decided to close the restaurant, and we actually ultimately were going to sell the restaurant, and so at this point, I was basically still in school. I was managing the restaurant at this point, but also going to school full time. So I had a lot on my plate. I was doing, easily 40 hours, more than 40 hours here at the restaurant while going to school full time. And it was an incredibly difficult and challenging time. But so we decided to basically sell the restaurant. Then had a buyer, kind of fell through, and so I was managing this whole thing. I was trying to look for a buyer. I had no idea what I was doing. I was only 21, 22 at this point, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was just practically looking for people to buy the business and trying to navigate that world. Hiring lawyers to draft contracts, but I had at this point, I mean, I have no really experience in doing any of this. I was just kind of winging it all, and I think my dad wasn't really helpful in any of this, and he kind of pushed it all on me, sort of in
okay.
my yeah, and my brother being younger than I was even lost than I was. So I basically kind of took charge and tried to sell the restaurant, and it couldn't find a buyer, and so we were kind of stuck with the space, um, and we just kind of decided to kind of hold on to it for a while. I was just about to graduate, maybe in about another year or two, college, and so what ended up happening was we just ended up holding onto this space and kind of paying rent for a year and a half, something like that. Uh, Went to school, and then by that time, my mom had sort of figured things out back home in Japan and was able to come back. But so we had basically taken about a year and a half off of the restaurant work. I mean, it was closed and was just sitting here for a while. Um, and then my mom, I mean, at this point, my brother, kind of moved on, went back to school, got a job as a pharmacy technician. And my sister, of course, has been long gone at this point. My dad has, kind of started up his own sort of flower business, doing his own thing. And so, um, I was the only one sort of left. And at this point, I mean, I kind of knew what I wanted for my life, and it was to go to school, being a working artist, and that's all I had imagined. And so I was in this phase where I just got out of, done with my BFA, and I was looking for MFA programs, and I found a great program that I wanted to go to. It was the Art Institute of Chicago, and so that's what I was going to pursue. I mean, that's why I started to work on sort of my application. At this point, my mother had came back from Japan, and obviously, naturally, she was going to reopen the restaurant. And since I was here, I was like, you know what, I'll be here, I'll help, and let's do this together for a while.
Sure.
And so that's what happened when we reopened the business, and we kind of changed things around, changed the menu a little bit. And so we restarted the business, and I was here, and it was her and I, doing it together. Um,
Do
and
you think
then,
taking some
yeah.
time away from the business, having it closed for about a year, sort of like renewed a perspective on like what it actually meant to you? Because maybe once it's closed, at least for a little bit, you kind of like start to miss it, or you think of like, well, what could I do better if we were to return? Because I'm sure
Mhm.
you didn't know you were going to return to it, but did that sort of like shift a perspective by saying like, oh man, like if only we could have done this, or maybe next time. Did being closed sort of shift your perspective?
It it did. I mean, I think, when we came back, we kind of changed the menu around altogether. I mean, there were things that were working when wasn't working. And it was really clear to me. I mean, at this point, my mom hadn't been at the restaurant for at least 2 years, but I was here and I was kind of seeing what was happening and realized, you know what, there's ways to probably do it a little bit better. And the reality is my mom started this business late. I mean, she was 50, I guess 52 or so, when she started this business. And so what I saw was, her being gone for 2 years and then coming back and reopening the restaurant. She really was getting there in age and had a hard time working the hours that she was. I mean, restaurant work is brutal. I mean, we're here, minimum, 80 to 90 hours. I mean, that's just what it takes to run a business or at least a restaurant, and
Hmm.
um, me being here, I saw how much it was working, and I knew it was taxing. And so when we came back, I think I ended up because I had at this point, I have no sort of professional cooking experience or anything. I just, what I knew was what I observed and saw. I knew I knew well how to wait tables and sort of the management side of it, payrolls and financing and things like that. But I, had no clue what really the back of the house looked like, only from what I can observe. So, but I thought, easy enough. I mean, I can probably do this. So, and it wasn't even really a question of whether I can do it or not. I just felt this obligation to, help in as much as I can because I saw my mom having a hard time, really. I mean, she would be sleeping in between shifts. I mean, we'd have the lunch shift and take maybe an hour, 2 hours in between, but she would be completely just crashed out, just exhausted. Seeing this, it was just heartbreaking. I just couldn't have her keep doing what she was doing, and I knew that it was time for me to kind of step up and try to help as much as I could. And so that's what I did. I went to the back, and my mom is she's kind of she's a hard person sometimes to get along with. She has a lot of pride and a lot of yeah. I mean, I guess she's a tiger mom, so it's hard to it's never seems like it's good enough. But I went into the back and I tried to learn as much as I could from her, and then as I started learning, I just got really invested in it. I mean, that's just my personality, I guess, is that,
Sure.
it's not like it's hard to ever say if I really love doing what I do. I don't really know if I ever have the answer for it. It's like some days I will love it, some days I hate it. And
I was gonna say, I feel like it can change. I mean, depending, because even if you love doing it,
yeah,
that doesn't mean it's not difficult. And when it's difficult, you can still sort of like feel frustrated and stressed out. But also, that doesn't mean you don't love it. I think it's sort
yeah,
of like this very
exactly.
flowy kind of emotion, with the good and the bad. Because a very sort of
Yeah,
spectrumy kind of thing.
absolutely. And it's more complicated when the family is involved, and you can't
Sure.
tell if you're just mad or angry at at my mom and or that I actually hate this restaurant, or it's all tied together and it's hard to understand where it starts and begins. And yeah, I mean that's so I basically started taking over much as I could. But again, I was still focused on art and that's what I all had in my mind. And so I was applying to grad school, so I had an interview with the Art Institute in Chicago. And that became sort of my dream school. Like I was set on going to this place, and I had kind of told my mom, hey, this is what's happening. And some point, I won't be here, and it's kind of
Right.
what I try to kind of ease her into it.
Around what time was that when you were sort of still thinking about pursuing other stuff? Was that 10 years ago?
This was closer to 10 years. It must have been at least 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, and so. And again, I never saw myself staying here and doing this for as long as I have. It was never really what I had planned for myself.
Hmm.
And I've always kind of thought this was sort of temporary, and I was going to pursue my own thing. And so yeah, I mean, I applied to grad school, and I got into this program. But what happened was I didn't get in with the a sort of a scholarship that I was kind of hoping for. I mean, it's an incredibly expensive program, so I was, ecstatic that I got into this program, but I really couldn't at the end of the day afford it. And so came back to, I mean, I went to Chicago to interview, came back, and then a couple weeks later, find out I got in. But then I was in this boat where, well, I can't afford it. I didn't really have a plan B. I was kind of, I put all my eggs in one basket, and I was like,
Yeah.
what do I do now? And so I just, I just kind of stuck around, and I was just going to keep making work, and and so maybe pursue graduate school in the next year. But what sort of happened was, I think at this point, again, my I was already taking a lot of responsibility at the restaurant. I was working here. At this point, really in the back of the house, I wasn't really up front anymore. I was kind of learning the back of the house, learning how to cook. And we've had a lot of great people, come through here, but we also had our share of unreliable people, and it became kind of difficult to find good help in the back. And so seeing this, I just knew that I needed to take a little bit more responsibility. And so that's what I ended up doing. I started taking over basically all of sort of the responsibility of cooking in the back. I was kind of learning from my mom and some other people as we kind of went along. And then soon I was just really fully invested in learning as much as I can. I started to buy a bunch of like cooking books. Instead of buying art books, it became sort of cookbooks. It became this obsession of just going down, reading anything I could, watching every YouTube thing I could find,
Sure.
or anything on the internet. Really going to different restaurants, looking how people work, how chefs moved around the kitchen. I just became just so into figuring out what was happening all over the country and what food looked like, what Japanese food looked like. It became an obsession where I saw the sort of development of Japanese cuisine in the nation and how people were using Japanese ingredients or Japanese techniques in a new way, how people were redefining sort of Japanese cuisine in the American context. And it became so fascinating to me. I have an obsessive, addictive personality, and so I just became addicted in all of that. It became from everything from like Japanese knives to techniques to people, and I don't know. I just started kind of seeking maybe the art in that, and that's just became my obsession. And when I knew it, I was kind of maybe more into the restaurant than my mom was in a certain way. I think I had a sort of a different perspective, and then maybe a different also hunger. Yeah, I just completely invested myself into this thing, and yeah, and here we are.
And I think it helps also, like, when you're young and you sort of have, like, that energy and a desire because like you just said, this is an art, and so while it might not have been the art you envisioned, you're still creating, and you're still creating experiences for people to consume differently, Um, and I think it's great because with food, you are giving somebody an experience that, I mean, it cannot be felt by like viewing art or seeing art. It is
Mhm.
something that you get to give. It's like this very visceral, we all need to eat. So why not eat something that tastes magnificent? And what's kind of cool is that, again, being a small business owner, is you get the opportunity to try things out and to be able to say, hey, we're going to try this thing, and if it works, maybe we'll continue to pursue it. If it doesn't work, it goes off the menu. And sort of like fine tuning what it is that not only you excel at doing, but also what you truly enjoy, something that is the juice worth the squeeze. You might have like a cool recipe on the menu that you try it out for a month and you go, this is awesome, but it's way too much work and way too few people order it or something like that. But also not but gosh, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, you said, hey John, do you want to try this smoked bacon curry? And obviously I only order curry from you guys, and it was sort of like, whoa, 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 there's a new curry in town, and you get
Mhm.
to try this brand new recipe. And obviously, I mean, I've ordered it exclusively since you've debuted it. But it's cool because you get the ability to also, once again, create. It's something that you get to try. You've tried many things. You've also, I think, toned down your menu somewhat significantly from what it used to be. But I think that can be a really huge advantage because you're not, opening it up to like so much variety that becomes overwhelming. But you're saying, well, here's like 8 dishes that we carry, and we can do all of them really well. Instead of 16 dishes, we do sort of like
Mhm.
loosey goosey because there's too many to choose from. Is that something when it comes to like designing the menu or trying things out? I know you did the cheesy tonkatsu curry, which you took off the menu at one
Mhm.
point. You were doing like these, I think, truffle fries for a little bit, and those were sort of like a limited time thing. Um, what's it like, sort of trying stuff out, only to find that it's either, oh, it's a little bit too much effort, or like what does that look like from the chef's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, really, we had a pretty big menu, and we were doing something, playing it safe, for a lot, for the most part. I mean, we were serving kind of things that people really wanted us to serve, or wanted Japanese restaurants really serve, and that looks like tempura and things like that. When COVID happened, though, we basically shifted gear. I mean, it became sort of impossible to serve certain staples like tempura. It doesn't really travel very well. And so we had to shift gears and figure out, well, what travels really well, what's simple, what's fast, and what's cost effective. Because it became it, we just didn't know what was, sort of the clients and people coming in for certain things. Um, so that really kind of put us in a different gear to challenge ourselves to rethink our concept a little bit. During COVID, of course, we did like a COVID menu where we were only serving, I think, like 6 items or something, and but it really allowed us to focus on, just staples and work on those things. Um, and it also really kind of allowed me to kind of rethink our restaurant altogether. I've always, yeah, I mean, I think people, for example, I mean, we used to serve sushi here, and I think we were probably one of the first Japanese restaurant here in town to stop serving sushi. But that's also because I didn't think that we needed to. I think Japanese food and Japanese restaurants are kind of pigeonholed to doing certain things. Making certain foods, and that happens to be tempura or sushi or teppanyaki, something like that. Um, but I also didn't think it was the most delicious or the most cost effective thing to do. And so COVID kind of gave us the excuse to do it. And then what happened was, I think I saw the market started changing too. I mean, what we always thought people came in here for a certain thing. When we didn't offer that certain thing, people kind of readjusted and maybe gave us more sort of trust to serve something different. I
Sure.
think people, restaurants get scared of not serving the same thing because I think, once, I'm kind of the same way when I go to a restaurant, I'm having the same thing. And if I can't get that certain thing, would I go somewhere else? But I think our customers have been really good. I mean, I think maybe we've earned their trust, maybe
Sure.
to try different things and yeah, just to kind of go all out and do something different outside of our comfort. My sort of concept and feeling about food, or at least here, has always been kind of this meeting point. My mom is, again, didn't wasn't trained in Japanese cuisine. I mean, she wanted to do French cuisine, and so growing up, I had a lot of different sort of food that she would cook, and so my upbringing wasn't that. So it was almost unauthentic to me to try and cook um, authentic Japanese cuisine. It became I was less interested in that. I wanted to see sort of the cross section of, like, where does Japanese cuisine meet sort of Western cuisine, and not in the way of sort of fusion, but really authentic to sort of my experience. So that's kind of where I went with it. I mean, a lot of the things on the menu are really, really about that, exploring that sort of space in between. I like to kind of think about it as a kind of a corner, because a corner really is a point of two planes meeting, and that's kind of how I see sort of myself and my upbringing. It's really two different cultures, and I'm always sort of exploring that space in between. I've had always a hard time, especially in Albuquerque, finding sort of who I am, being a half Japanese person. And it's difficult, it's challenging. My Japanese is my first language, and I lived in Japan. Big chunk of my childhood, I lived in Japan. But I never really felt like I belonged there. I look different. And so my name is different. I have a Japanese first name, but a English last name. And um, I've never really felt that I belonged anywhere. And here in Albuquerque, you know, you don't look at me and think Asian or anything like that. I kind of get mistaken for being Hispanic or Mexican, and so my identity has always been sort of confusing. And um, but I think that's kind of how what I'm exploring now in food is what is sort of that meeting point. What is sort of authentic to me, and what is it? Yeah, I mean that's how sort of been my thing for the last couple of years, and cooking food in between. And so the bacon curry is kind of exactly that. I mean, it's it's kind of interesting. I mean, like that dish is basically it's we've been serving this sort of potato salad called the Benton's bacon potato salad, and it's this bacon that we buy from Benton's. They do hams and bacon, things like that, from Nashville, Tennessee. And so I've heard about different sort of chefs talk about this bacon, and I decided to order a bunch of it. And uh, we started making this sort of like chili oil, bacon grease dressing, basically, that we kind of toss our potatoes in. And the curry is basically exactly that. We basically take the same sort of bacon, and we render it, and then we just kind of mix it and fold it into our curry with some other things, cream and things like that. And that's all really what the bacon curry is. But again, it's kind of thinking outside of the box of what Japanese cuisine could be. And still kind of thinking about Japan. I mean, smoking food is huge in Japanese cuisine. A lot of people don't know this. Like katsuobushi, for example, which is what we use for our dashi. It's this dried, most of the time mackerel. It could be different fish, but what they do is they dry and smoke it. And so, really, when you have miso soup, you're really actually, consuming something that's been smoked. That's origin, katsuobushi. For me, when I think, smoked bacon curry and stuff is like kind of out there, not really Japanese. But I think conceptually, the concept of or the technique of smoking is really very much part of Japanese cuisine. So I do see sort of these connections that I'm drawing, or I think I'm trying to draw, that may go unnoticed or over a lot of people's heads. But
Sure.
yeah.
Okay. So does this make you, because I feel like the smoked curry bacon, as far as I'm concerned, has been a hit, but I also don't know from your perspective how many people order it and what the feedback's been. To me, it's like,
Mhm.
the ultimate chef's kiss. But does this give you more poise to possibly do more experimental stuff like this in the future, to not only say, we've got our Japanese staples, but like we want to pizzazz it just a little bit more and give a more unique
Sure.
look and unique offering into, what this food can be? Does that give you sort of more creative ideas for stuff in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm at this like kind of interesting point in my life where I'm not really interested in necessarily cooking Japanese cuisine, or I just want to find the next most delicious thing, and
Oh, sure.
that's kind of what I'm saying. And it's kind of interesting, and it's kind of the philosophy my mom has always had. Starting this business is that it's always food first and before anything. If it's delicious, who cares? And that's kind of what we've always
Sure.
thought. And that's kind of what I think we adopted more here recently is, why not just cook things that we want to cook, and if it's delicious, that's it. I mean, and people, I think people again come here with a certain idea of like, well, I want a Japanese cuisine, and I don't think you really get that here anymore. I mean, we do still do a lot of kind of regional cuisine, in a lot of ways, and we still, have staples here. But I think now we're at this point of wanting to push the envelope a little bit more. Maybe just cook for the sake of cooking, and not be so concerned about making Japanese cuisine.
Hmm.
I think that's really more true to sort of my mom's vision as well, when she started this business. And um, yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I see food now.
Sure.
It's
Well, it reflects very much on the name of the restaurant, which is now Magokoro instead of Kokoro.
mhm.
Kokoro meaning, I believe, heart, and
Yeah,
Magokoro sincerity.
exactly. Yeah, so my mom, when she started this like sushi business, she was calling it Kokoro Foods.
Mm,
And so when we opened this business, it was, naturally we'd call it Kokoro Japanese restaurant.
right.
But there was another Kokoro in Denver, and so we were basically one day we got a letter in the mail from their lawyer saying, "Hey, you gotta change your name. We own the rights to this thing." And
Own the rights to a Japanese word, that's what they're trying to pull on you?
yeah, exactly. And so we're like,
Oh.
"Well, shoot," we're like, "Well, what do we do?" We obviously have to like change our name, and so um, what we did, we just changed it to Magokoro, which is, Kokoro is basically one kanji, one character,
Mm,
and it means heart or soul. Magokoro is basically just another character placed in before the Kokoro, which now really means with a pairing of two characters, it really means sincerity. And so, for our perspective, it felt um, like a good compromise. It felt like we were sort of leveling up, or becoming something a little bit different, which was
there you go.
what we were. We were something different at this point. We weren't so focused on serving traditional Japanese food, but kind of transitioning into something different, something more interesting, I think. Yeah, and drawing on different sort of backgrounds and
Sure.
techniques, and yeah, wanting to start something a little bit more interesting.
So with the restaurant, and you've been doing this for a long time, you've been involved for 15 years, but you've sort of been off and on for the first handful. With all of it, what's the biggest struggle that you faced? I mean, like, there's highs and there's lows, but like sometimes in the middle of things, you're just sort of like, God, I just want to give up. Like it's just something is it's too
Yeah.
overwhelming, or you don't know where to go, or you don't know what to do, and you just simply maybe in a moment just feel like I can't do this. Like what did you ever have a moment like that running this business where you're just like, I don't know. I don't know what to do.
All the time, dude, all the time. I mean, like, I would say that I probably feel like that more than I don't. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so many highs and lows here, and I think it's true about probably every small business, one week it'd be amazing, you feel like you're on the clouds and everything is working out. And then the week after it'd be different, someone can't work, come to work, or, it's I have a lot of sort of, personally, you know, with my own sort of demons, it's hard to, yeah, it's hard to feel like you're doing a good job. And I don't know, I have so much, it's so hard because I think I have so much invested here, so much time and so much history here. And I take it probably way too seriously, and it's hard not to because this is my everything. I've
Right.
invested, I've been here more, half of my life here now at this point. So there's a lot of sort of invested, and maybe I'm a control freak. Maybe I don't know what it is. I have certain expectations, and a lot of times when I fall short of that, it's hard to stay positive, or it's interesting because I think a lot of business owners may feel the same way, but I do have this fear that everything's going to end. Like today's my last day of business, and I wake up and I get a bad review, and that's it, or something. It's really,
Yeah.
and and it's a hard thing to it's I think about that every day. I literally think that the restaurant's closing every day, and it's unreasonable. I know that, and it just that's not how things work. But um, I do feel uncertain or scared in a lot of times, and
Sure.
it's hard sometimes to get over those sort of fears, and yeah, and keep going, keep making work, or keep making food here. I don't know. I don't have an answer. I'm in this sort of, in a weird place now. I'm kind of. I always feel like I'm kind of in a rut or something. I don't know.
Sure.
It's hard to really describe this feeling.
Well, there's sort of almost, I want to say, like a blessing in that it's because every moment as a small business owner is uncertain. I think it's exciting because like you hopefully you love what you do despite the highs and the lows, but also like you don't have infinite capital. You don't have like any sort of guarantee. You
Yeah,
don't Everything is so nebulous and up in the air all the time that like it really could change overnight. And there's almost like this thrill, I think, in that, and by saying like every day I've made it, like I've done a good job. But also you might wake up in the middle of the night with a phone call that's like you got broken into, and then you got to deal with insurance, and then it's very demoralizing, and then this or that or the other, and it sort of avalanches. but every day that you get a chance to go into work and actually keep doing it is a good day. But it's scary because it's so uncertain. And I don't know. I think the uncertainty, I don't like it exactly, but it makes me
Yeah.
appreciate a lot of the, you know, every next day, as long as I'm still there, I'm okay.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, I think you got to be a little crazy to, be in the restaurant biz and in the
I
small
can't even
restaurant
imagine.
business.
Yeah, I can't
And
even imagine.
yeah, I mean, for us, we're tiny here and we have such a small staff, and it's hard to find covers and things like that. I mean, we take a lot of days off. I feel like, and certain things happen, and I think, um, yeah, it's hard to stay positive all the time. And
Sure.
doing this for so long, I think you definitely get better at managing that stress.
Mhm.
But burnout is a real thing, and especially in a restaurant. It's I you have to kind of find people to talk to, sort of support groups. Like, you have to be having a community. I mean, those are you have to have the people to kind of fall back on and ask for help. Especially sort of emotionally, mentally. We've been pretty blessed here to have good friends who are also in the business. Who we can kind of talk to. Yeah, I mean, shout out to the shop. Iz and Paula at the shop, they've been really great. Ihotab has been great. Nobu-san there and Yuko-san. Um, and so we're kind of blessed to have that. But it's an important thing, I think, again, to have a community of people. We're in the same boat, who can understand what you're going through, because it's really easy to feel like you're alone in all of this, and like you feel like people don't understand what you're going through. But it's just nice to be able to find that community and people who can give you sort of support, and you know yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you rely on the good experiences because it's inevitable. You're going to get somebody who's not going to quite understand, or they're going to, you might even have a bad day and it's fully your fault. Sometimes, like, it's
Yeah.
just going to happen. We've all been there, and it is sort of a mixture. If you were like an exclusively good place, I'd almost sort of like wonder what weird like voodoo you have going on to make it like so nobody ever complains. But I think what I like about it as well too, and I get this from both you and Hunsuk, is that like there is a lot of love that goes into your business. And I think as a small business owner, you have to sort of have that. You have to have this level of passion despite the hard times, because it's almost sort of like what you create for people in terms of food or art or whatever it might be is an extension of your own philosophy. And food, if people make food begrudgingly or like just without sincerity, it's not going to taste good. It's not going to be a good experience because it simply just exists to exist rather than it exists to provide or to give or to share with somebody else. Um, and so I want to thank both you and Hunsik especially for your hospitality and welcoming nature of the business, because I think as far as I'm concerned, there's a philosophy. I don't know exactly what yours is, but that extends into your creation. It is very much part of what you guys do and what you have built the store to be for yourself, that you can taste, you can feel. It is a labor of love, and no matter how difficult that love is, it is apparent. And that's why I love supporting you guys so much. I mean, when it comes to just what it is that means something to you, that means a lot to you, like you seem like a very wonderfully social person, and I'm just sort of curious, what is it about your business that overlaps with your philosophy, your take on life? I mean, I'd imagine they
Hmm.
have to intertwine. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean,
It's a weird question, I know,
it,
but it's
no, no, I totally understand. I mean, we used to have a sign up here, and I think it said something like "honestly made" or something like that.
yeah.
But that's that's what it is. I mean, and actually, at our dessert shop around the corner, we also have that sort of like "made honestly" kind of on our walls. But that's kind of our philosophy here, is that, like, we're kind of making things with a lot of love and a lot of care. And that's how kind of we've always said, you can really taste love in food, and 100% believe in that, and that's kind of how my mom had always done it. She had poured a lot of love into everything she'd done here, and same with me in Hunsuk. I mean, we really just pour everything that we have in here. There's not a day that I come in here and I'm not giving it all. There's just not a day like that. Even when at my lows, that's not something that I've ever been. I'm here to give it everything. And I want people to love everything here. And hopefully be able to taste that effort and that we put into it. It's kind of the way I think my mom has also raised me, and how I sort of approach my life in art. It's really about making something that is thoughtful and authentic, and it has to be. It's almost, I don't know. I kind of see sort of art and food in the same way that, like, I want it to be almost like an onion, where you sort of peel back the layers and examine what's the inside, and
Hmm.
every layer has goes even further. And um, that's kind of how I want to make food here, and I want it to be thoughtful. I want it to be, um, not just because something, one, obviously that has to taste good, but it has to have that sort of complexity, and that's why, I talk about sort of the Benton's bacon and the curry and the smoked things. I want it to have more um, context and kind of draw these lines, of okay, well, here is something that is very un-Japanese, but it is sort of very Japanese in some ways, and having that sort of thoughtfulness in food, yeah, I don't know how, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, and that's fantastic. That's exactly it. I think your authenticity is noticed, and I think that's really the best way to create any sort of art. Because if you pump things out, for the sake of numbers, it's very different than saying I want each of these experiences to
mhm,
be wonderful on their own.
yeah.
And you can tell, you can very much tell. So you said you grew up in Japan,
Mhm.
and you were born in Japan. Is that correct?
So no, I was actually born in Santa Fe, but I
Oh,
moved to
gotcha.
Japan, yeah, as an infant. So I was probably in Japan from the age of 1 or 2 all the way to about second grade.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, and so Japanese was my first language, and then coming back to Albuquerque or Santa Fe originally. So my mom basically moved to Japan. Took us kids, and my dad kind of stayed here for a little while. Um, so we moved to Japan. She was from Niigata, Japan, and it's a little town called Narachi, which is kind of coastal. And so it's my grandparents were they raised cattle, and so grew up in the countryside. And my mom was just basically helping raise cattle with my grandparents. And so when I was about second grade, we moved back to the states, originally to Santa Fe, and then moved back down here to Albuquerque. And so then I had to basically learn English as a second
Hmm.
language. Yeah, and I've been sort of been here since. I would make trips back to Japan almost every summer. Um, to kind of see my grandparents, and we'd spend, the good portion of the summer there, summer break. So it's about 2 months of the year.
Hmm.
My mom, I mean, we didn't really, we grew up pretty poor, and so my mom, my parents would work really hard, save enough money to be able to send us kids back to Japan, to spend time with our grandparents, make sure that we didn't forget our Japanese, and just kind of get back to our roots. So we'd spend about 2 months there, and during that 2 months, we'd just be in the countryside. There's nothing there, you really, so we'd be spending most of the time outdoors, riding bicycles. We'll be fishing at the ocean, and just a lot. Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
just being kids.
That's fun. So, and then we'll sort of like return to this a little bit later. But when you were growing up in, well, both America and Japan, apparently, um, I always got to ask, did you play any video games?
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, of course, man. I mean, Pokemon. I mean, of course, like the Game
Oh,
Boy. Obviously.
absolutely. I can't even imagine. I mean,
Uh,
the popularity in Japan of that was like worlds beyond. It
Oh
still
yeah,
is,
totally.
but okay, so you grew up with some Pokemon in Japan, and, did you play that with, people back here in North America too when you came back?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, it was cool because we had sort of like the Japanese versions of everything, and
Oh,
so
yeah.
people would be, I mean, we, for example, like I think was it the green version that you couldn't get here or something?
Correct.
Yeah, and so we would have like the green version, and people would be like, "Whoa, what is that?" And we're like, "Oh, this is Japanese and this and that."
That's cool.
I feel like it'd be much cooler now. I mean, it wasn't too cool back then, I mean, I think we kind of hid the fact of being Asian or Japanese, because it was
Sure.
very uncool. It was really uncool to be Asian. I think when I was growing up, I feel like I'd be ridiculed a lot of times. Foods and stuff that I would have. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't cool to be Asian. I personally try to hide the fact that I was Asian a lot of times. I just remember like my mom would come and pick me up, at school or something. And this is probably in middle school. But I would wait to see who's picking me up, is whether it's my dad or my mom. And if it's my mom pulling up, I'm like, oh my God. I would basically like run, and so that she wouldn't come all the way to this like a pickup zone so I can get in the car. And then once I got in the car, I would kind of, lean my seat back so that like other people couldn't see me, and see my mom coming through. Um, and I mean, people sort of, I think, when people hear Seiya, they think Isaiah. And so maybe a lot of people
Oh,
are
okay.
mistaking my name all the times and, thinking I'm maybe Hispanic or Mexican in origin. And so when
Sure.
they see my mom as Japanese or Asian, they're like, people, my friends would give me a lot of shit about it. And so because it wasn't cool, my mom would make some like Japanese food a lot of times, like little rice balls, onigiri, and things like that to take to
Yeah.
school. But it would be the most embarrassing thing, so you'd have to kind of hide and eat your lunch so that nobody would see it,
And this is
or
back sort
nobody
of
would
in
smell
grade
it.
school is what you're thinking? Because I
Yeah,
feel like
exactly.
in
Grade
in the
school.
mid 2000s to even late 2000s, I think it started to become culturally more sort of sought after. Anime was getting bigger, and, as video games started to become more mainstream. So I wonder if there was sort of like a shift at some point in which that, like, sort of changed for you. Is that something you noticed at any point?
You know, not so much for me,
Oh, no.
honestly.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't see a lot of people. I mean, there were certain people who thought it was really cool, right, for me to be Japanese, and
Sure.
there were just a couple of people at school who thought differently. But most people, I think, didn't care or had made fun of me a lot of times, for being
Interesting.
Asian. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, it was something I was definitely self conscious about growing up.
Fascinating. That's an interesting
Yeah,
challenge because I felt
definitely.
like Japanese, especially, with anime and video games, had sort of like this very strong draw to it. But also, I mean, I'm sure that was reflected by your experience in Japan, where you felt very out of place. So maybe it was sort of you're consistently sort of like wondering, where do I fit in all the time? You know?
Yeah, definitely. I think, people who are, um, Hapa or halves, have always kind of struggled with that because we don't neatly fit in anywhere,
Right.
I think I'm always trying to looking for sort of my belonging, can I neatly fit in? Who are my people, and in Japan, it's here I identify as more being Japanese than anything, but in Japan, I identify as being American, and white, and it's sort of this balance, and I never found myself neatly fitting into one or the other. Um, and it's challenging. It's really hard.
Do you think owning the restaurant and having Japanese cuisine and like even the name, do you think that's allowed you to sort of like lean into your heritage a bit more without so much like fear as you had grown up with it?
Yes and no. I mean, you know, I think in the Japanese community here, I think they maybe view me or in the restaurant as being sort of unauthentic and not
Mm,
really Japanese. I get that a lot here. I'll have a lot of people sort of looking in the kitchen, looking at me. I had this one experience when this one guy came to say that he really enjoyed the food, but when he popped in the back of the kitchen, saw me and saw everybody else who weren't Japanese or Asian, was confused, and he was like, "You're not Japanese," and I was like, "No." I mean, I don't know. It's always kind of hard to, say. Well, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to really, claim sort of my Japanese heritage and say, "Yeah, I am Japanese," or because it's always I felt like an imposter,
Sure.
and I feel as an imposter cooking too. I'm not really a chef or a cook, and I've never had formal really training in it. Mostly sort of self taught or taught by my mom, and so it's always kind of this thing where I have something to prove. Maybe I don't know,
Mhm. Well, I can
and
also safely tell you that I've eaten at many Japanese restaurants around town, and when I was in Japan, curry's my number one. But I would eat at so many places in Japan, Koku Ichibanya, and then just countless places here and there. I have not found any place in Albuquerque or even New Mexico that has tasted as close to Japanese curry as yours. And that's why I
oh,
keep
thank you so
returning,
much.
is because like it gives me the feeling of like this is the best I've had outside of being in Japan itself.
Well, thank you so much. I
So
mean,
yeah, don't feel like a fraud or anything by any means, because you guys are nailing it. And I want to really stress that, like, I understand the sort of imposter syndrome of sort of like, well, is it really authentic because I get called out on it so much? But no, let me tell you.
well, thank you so much. I mean, yeah, it's something we work on every. I mean, it's sort of my kind of personality is I'm really anal about things. I really want to get it right, and
Yeah.
the curry changes every week, and that's something I think people don't understand is that you were asking me before. I mean, we change the menu up a lot and do things short term. Who knows how long the bacon curry is going to be available for? Because I get kind of bored, and I keep wanting to try to improve things all the time.
That makes sense.
And yeah, and the curry is really exactly the same thing. The process of making a curry is actually changes by the week, and the recipe changes pretty frequently, actually. You know, and it's interesting. I mean, I think people really love us for consistency, but for us, it's actually always sort of a work in progress here. We've changed the curry recipe at this point numerous times, maybe sort of the fundamental sort of like process how we make it. So there's a lot of things that go in. We're not, for me, I mean, I think things are changing every single day. How we make things, we try to improve every single day here.
Sure.
And that just how we do it here.
Sure. And I actually think that's a great philosophy. I think for a restaurant, the moment you start getting complacent in making like your food and it becomes boring, I think as far as I'm concerned, it would make it reasonable to want to say, well, how do we keep this going so we can keep making it interesting and more exciting, not just for the people who are eating it, but for yourselves. I know people sort of have expectations when it comes to, well, I want the same thing, but it's just as important for you guys to make food that I think gives people the same feeling, but you get to do it differently, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, working in sort of the hospitality, I mean, it's really all about wanting to serve people and wanting to give them what they want.
Right.
But at the same time, there's wanting them to kind of sort of our vision and what we think food can be, and really challenging people to go out of their sort of comfort zone. I want the experience here to be that, of something more interesting than that, something that you can't just get anywhere else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, fantastic. So I've only got a handful of questions left for you. We're getting down to like the sort of last part of this podcast, but I wanted to ask you 5 questions. Okay.
Okay.
One of them I'm super curious about, but I want to know if you could recommend to anybody a book, a book that has either changed your life or a book that really resonated with you, a book that
hmm
was just really, just for whatever reason, a book that you could recommend to anybody right now. Do you have a book in mind?
A book in mind right now. Oh
Yeah,
man.
I know, I'm very on the spot, right?
Jeez, man, that's really hard. I mean, I read a lot, but I read, let's see, a book in mind right now. I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I love, Catcher in the Rye, for whatever reason,
Catcher
is
in the
something
Rye.
that
Sure.
I that's probably one of my favorite books of all time.
Just a really good
I
work.
love
Okay.
Catcher in the Rye. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, yeah, that's hard to say. I mean, readings have sort of changed so dramatically. I mean, I used to read a lot of art books, and I'm not sure people would be really interested in that. But like
Sure.
Susan Sontag, of course, and sort of philosophy of photography and history of photography, something I'm really interested in.
Hmm.
But now, I mean, my interests have changed so much. I mean, I don't really read a whole lot of like art books or anything. My reading now has all been about fly fishing. That's kind of where
Oh, okay.
what I've been reading a lot. Yeah, so it's kind of it's like my recommendation would be so weird, that I don't think people would really be into.
Oh, but that's what's kind of great though, is I mean, it's fun to sort of get an insight as to like what makes you tick, and not like, hey, I need to make
Sure.
this, general recommendation. Is there a fly fishing book that for some reason just captures your interest the most?
Yeah, I mean, I love Taos Fly Shop. Shout out to Taos. That's my hat that I'm wearing now. But
Sweet.
that's probably one of the most recent books I read was it's a book through Taos Fly Shop. I think it's called The Instinctive Fly Fisher, I think is the book
Okay.
that I've read. Yeah, I mean, again, so I'm really come from, so photography. I mean, I came into the world of fine arts and photography, and that really, in photography, photo books are huge, and photography books is kind of what I've collected for a long, long time,
Okay.
and I used to work for a bookseller, that sold photography books and art books, and so I, I'm really interested in art history books and art books in general, but really artists and stuff that I love. Like, I mean, I don't know. There's just so many. I don't know what kind of recommendation. It seems like it was such a
Sure.
wild thing,
Well,
but
right, and this is what's kind of fun is like it doesn't need to be any. It could be specific to you. It could be what you recommend.
yeah.
Like, Catcher in the Rye, Susan Sontag. Like, I think that's great. I think it's a good set of recommendations that sort of cover a small spectrum.
All
So,
right.
oh, perfect. Okay. And now, what about like a, movie or a TV show? I don't know if you watch a lot of movie or TV,
Ooh, I
but like
watch.
if there's is anything you've been sort of obsessing over recently?
Oh man, I've obsessed about so many things. It's so funny because in this kitchen, that's all. I mean, um, man. Okay, there's so many shows. Let's see. I got really into The Sopranos for a minute there.
Oh wow,
Again, I
that's
have
kind of
like
a
an
fun
obsessive.
obsession.
I know I have. I am this. I have this like I have an addiction to things. So like if I start a show, I have to finish it. And so I
Sure.
basically binge watch The Sopranos for like. Oh man, it was yeah. The Sopranos are good. I love talking about sort of like televisions and movies, media in general, and sort of the
Sure.
theories behind the characters and stuff. The Sopranos, of course. I watch Game of Thrones. Throwback. I've been watching Game of Thrones a lot.
There you go.
Watched the whole thing. Man, I'm Hal Stark. Like if I had it's like let's see, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Larry
Oh,
David.
that's
Pretty
a stressful show. I
so
love watching it, but I feel
yeah.
stressed out by it all the time.
Dude, yeah, totally. And I think, yeah, I think that's what I love about it is that it's like every situation that you definitely have gone through it to a certain extent, and
Yeah.
to rewatch it and be able to watch it and laugh at it is
Yeah.
kind of great,
Absolutely. Take a step back from
Um,
reality, but yeah, it's also too
yeah,
relatable is the problem. It's like I know these people. I know this guy. I've met
totally,
this Larry
yeah.
David person in many different people before.
Oh, totally. And I started thinking that I am Larry David, and I
Oh no.
just feel like, yeah,
The older you get, I think the more you also start to relate to it as well. I'll tell you that much.
totally, totally.
Okay, and now here's one I've been thinking about for a while because
Yeah.
I don't know how often you eat the food that you create, if you make food for yourself often. But when it comes to like a favorite food, and I mean, you
Mhm.
could say your own food, and I would totally understand. But I'm curious as to if you're not surrounded by Magokoro recipes, what is your food of choice? Local restaurant, it could be frozen pizza, like it could be whatever it is that like you're just sort of your go-to.
Oh man, so I mean, usually I get out of here kind of late, right? So, and I never want to eat my own food. That just doesn't happen. Hate
Yeah,
cooking for myself.
don't
I love
partake
it
in
when
your
people
own
cook.
stash.
No, no. it's so boring, you know. I love when people cook for me. That's my favorite meal.
Oh, good.
But yeah, usually, you know, I get out of here. It's kind of late. Most places are kind of closing or have closed, and so it's a lot of junk food. Honestly, I think like
Yeah.
there's a conception that like you know chefs eat really well or something, and that's just not true. I think like you know if you're a real chef, you're probably eating a lot of junk food, a lot of quick, easy things. You may just
Sure.
like I'll just go home sometimes, man, and I will just it's just a lot of like quick, easy junk foods. Geez, man. I've been in a weird quesadilla kick right now, and so like I'll go home and I'll just make like tons of quesadillas at home because it's fast, it's
Super
easy.
fast. Sure. And
Yeah,
are, but are you
it's
still
really
making these
junky.
from scratch, or are you just buying like frozen ones and heating them up? Are you going to Taco Bell, Taco Cabana? Like,
Oh man, okay, so it's bad. It gets I used to yeah, I'll get into this phase where we'll be eating a lot of Taco Bell or a lot of like so I was going through this thing where I was eating a lot of McDonald's and then I think I finally got over that. And
sure,
so yeah, now I'm on to Taco Bell and just cooking at home a lot now. I'm trying to focus more on just cooking out, eating out a little bit less junk food,
sure.
try to take care of myself a little bit. But it's also another thing. I mean, I take a lot of comfort in food. You know, if I'm having a bad day, then I'm at home just you know binge eating and trying to feel a little better. So it's yeah, it's everything in between.
Okay, okay. But it sort of sounded like you cited quesadillas as sort of being like that sort of number one, like that's your current vice.
Current vice, yeah, and then it was Little Caesar for a minute there.
Oh,
The five,
fast and easy.
oh, dude, yeah, the grab and go, yeah, that's my thing, dude.
Totally, totally. Convenience is king in a world of madness.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And now this is what I kind of wanted to cycle back to. You touched upon growing up with some Pokemon, but what about a favorite video game? I have to, of course, I have to ask this
Ooh.
one. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Favorite video game. I mean, so yeah, grew up. Pokemon was huge. You know, I was like crazy into it.
sure.
Crazy into Pokemon, and then for a while, but my mom is kind of interesting. Is that like so we had like Game Boys, right? But she didn't let us play anything else. Like PlayStation, Xbox, that was out of the question. Like I didn't. So I've never owned my own sort of like console, like right, like no PlayStations I've ever owned. Is my brother really is the one who really got into like PlayStation
Okay,
and he got his first sort of PlayStation when we were in like middle school or something, maybe starting high school. She just didn't allow it in the house. But dude, I've taken up playing a lot of Switch, Nintendo Switch. That's sort of my during, especially during when COVID happened. I
oh
bought one of
sure.
those, and that's all I was doing. Breath of the Wild, Zelda. Whoa,
Uh-huh.
dude, I've been just like, yeah, I'm so excited for the second one to come out, and I feel like I've
That's
just been, you know, waiting forever.
oh yeah,
Um,
that's been 5 years at least. I mean, since the original came out, and also one of my favorite games of all time, without a
is it
question.
coming? Is the second one actually coming?
So they recently did say that it was finally coming, I believe, spring of next year. They actually gave like a solid date. They delayed it like twice, but I believe we're looking at like April or May or something of next year. I can't remember offhand, but it's close.
Oh yeah,
So they say. But I mean, I'm going to say with good faith this time, it's almost here.
yeah.
But yeah, good choice. Good choice. That game I could sink
Oh, it's
myself
so
into
good,
for hundreds of
so good.
hours. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Oh, good. Okay. And now, one final one, and one of the most important ones to me is if you could just give anybody a piece of advice, what do you got?
Don't work in a restaurant. I'm just kidding. Piece of advice, huh? I don't know.
Yeah,
Do what you're passionate about. Follow your heart. At the end of the day, I think that's what it is. It's like if you just got to do things that you're passionate about. That's kind of how I'm trying to live my life. You know, I'm trying to do things that I'm only, you know, passionate about, and that's sort of always been my compass, you know, and to follow. And I think that's kind of all what I care about, you know, is following my heart and doing what I love.
that's yeah. I mean, it's a beautifully simple philosophy, but I think it sometimes gets lost that like if you aren't truly passionate about doing something, you will struggle with it in the long run,
For sure.
especially. Yeah. I mean, that's this has been a fantastic. There's been a lot of insight into how difficult it is to run your own business, to run a restaurant. I can't even imagine the stresses of a restaurant. You know, mine has its own unique set of challenges, but like what you
Sure.
have to do is stressful beyond my comprehension. And so I'm really impressed and very proud of how you've been able to do this and handle this, the kind of pressures that must come with it. But amazing job. You guys are doing great. And
Thank
is
you.
this something you feel like you're going to do for the foreseeable future, or is there something else on the horizon someday?
I don't know. It's hard to say.
It's fair.
I mean, the dessert shop was kind of our step towards that. Trying to still work in food, but something really different.
Sure.
And I don't really know. That's the thing about here in Magokoro for me is I think things change pretty rapidly and pretty dramatically. And who knows? I don't know. We may be here forever. We may not.
Yeah, that's fair. That's it's kind of a big question, but
Yeah.
I just know that for the time being, it's much appreciated what you do and how well you guys do it. So
Thank you so much.
absolutely. So I want to thank you for being part of this, but also one final thing is there any social media where people can find you? I think you have an Instagram page, and uh, I don't know if you guys like do Twitter or anything like that at all.
Yeah, I mean, we don't do Twitter, but we are on Instagram. We're pretty lazy about it. Not me. I mean, like, well, me, I'm the lazy one.
Sure.
But Hunsik, my wife, she manages a lot of that, and yeah, I mean, that's a good place to follow us and follow us at our dessert shop too. At Tomonomi said we haven't been open for a little while, but we're trying to. We may reopen, who knows? But that's the place to get all our information and what's happening at the shop. Yeah, we do have like a Facebook and things like that, but we're not active on that. So Instagram is kind of the way to get a hold of us, or
That makes sense. Okay,
keep us posted.
magokoroabq.com, I believe, is your website
It
for
is. Yep.
ordering food and getting hours and all that kind of stuff. Okay,
Hmm.
so we got Magokoro and Tonari no Mise.
Yep.
Yeah,
Perfect.
perfect. Excellent. So yeah, Seiya, thanks again for being part of this podcast and being a guest. I've been looking greatly forward to this one for a while, um, and I want to thank you for helping create humanity.
Thank you.
So
Thanks for having me on.
absolutely, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.